Hey, I'm really glad you're here today. On the We Are All Dying podcast, my hope is that we don't just have conversations with people, but we create conversations with each other. My name is Jenna Goodhand. You are at the We Are All Dying podcast. And today we are talking with Reshma Kearney. And this conversation is so important. We talk about suicide. We talk about the loss of partners to suicide. We talk about the language around suicide. And yes, I've just said the word suicide now at least 4 times because we need to talk about it. And my hope is that in listening to our conversation today, together, we not only have a better understanding of those we've lost to suicide, but also how to care for and support those who are living in the aftermath of those losses. Welcome to the show, Reshma. I'm so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you, Jenna. I'm happy to be here too.
One of the things that I like to ask guests from the start is to share what they can remember of their first experience with death. So, if you're a child or a young adult, what was the first death where you recognize and realize death exists?
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I had this image of my high school self, my teenage self, standing outside at the back of my house by my pool with my friends. And I like can see it in my mind. I'm crying. And it was one of my dad's older brothers who passed away. He was older, but not older like you would just expect that to happen. So maybe late 60s. So you're not really expecting, and he wasn't sick or anything. And I remember my friends were over and we were swimming, and then my parents came out, or one of my parents came out to tell me. And so I got out of the pool and I was crying, and
Wow.
my friends comforted me, and then, I had to tell everyone to leave. Yeah.
Yeah. So thinking back to that and how, I mean, even having your friends there is kind of unique, in terms of the stories that I've heard from people. How do you think that influenced kind of how you felt in that moment or even going forward around, death and loss, having people present, or even anything you want to share around how your family, kind of shared that news with you in the days after, if there's anything cultural that you found unique or helpful or even like challenging in later, deaths and losses?
Yeah. I I don't remember what it felt like in that moment. Like the only thing I can think of is that it was just weird. I was very sad and I was crying, and I don't think I even paused. You know what I mean? It was like I got the news and I started crying. And for the days to follow, I remember my home was always safe to cry in and feel in. And it wasn't even my mom who made that safe space for me, it was more my dad, which culturally is unique because he's now 77 years old, South Asian man. So the fact that he gave me that space and encouraged the tears and the talking, um, probably shaped how I've dealt with death and trauma and all kinds of loss moving forward in life.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if that comes up in anything else we talk about, I'd love for you to include that as well, because I think
Yeah.
it really does shape kind of even the permissions we give ourselves on how to deal with grief and loss in those first teachings, right? Or how people respond to us. But one of the main reasons we're here today is to talk about Sean and the experience that you and your children and family have had. Before we kind of get into the topic around his death, I'd love to know who Sean was and is to you and your family.
Yeah. Sean he was a multi-dimensional person. He like no one, you really had to know him to know him. Um, Very smart and hardworking, had a dry sense of humor, witty sense of humor. That's what drew me to him at first. And he was an outdoor enthusiast and opened up my world to all things outdoors. And I love that. I loved that and I continue to love that about him because that has now become a huge part of my healing journey, being outside, moving my body, touching, being barefoot outside. I never did that when he was alive, and now I'm always barefoot. In fact, my kids and I were laughing the other day. I wear Birkenstocks now. I have some really cute gold ones, and Sean always wore Birkenstocks, and I'd make fun of him. And now I wear them, and so I wish he could see that. He sees it, but yeah, he had this ability to talk to anybody. He was a great conversationalist because he was such a good listener. And he could talk to an 85-year-old and a 5-year-old, and both people would feel super seen by him. And I miss that a lot. I miss that a lot about our partnership.
Yeah, I love that, through the Birkenstocks, you're almost like walking in his shoes, right? Like
Yeah,
like you've taken on these aspects of him in your own life and physically with the Birkenstocks.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What was life like before 2022 for you and your family?
It was beautiful and messy at the same time. It was really, really good and really, really bad. Lots of dichotomies, a lot of need for balance. And um, it it was challenging. There was a lot of love in our home, but there was a lot of tension and unrest and um, lack of peace at times. And I think for the kids, it was confusing, especially the years leading up to, I'd say about 1 to 2 years before Sean passed away. Um, the kids saw a lot of behavior that didn't make sense. And it got to a point where I had to talk to them about depression and anxiety. And we had been practicing mindfulness for years. So they were able to label feelings for themselves, notice emotions, and express them. And I had even taught them how to recognize anxiety in their body because we feel it in our body. And I had to start talking to them about depression and tell them that their dad had depression. So a lot of, I think I had to do a lot of the balancing for all of us.
Right. Yeah, that must have been so hard.
Yeah.
So Sean was in the military. At what
Mhm.
point did he retire from that?
He was he was in for 16 years. He was an orthopedic surgeon, and so 20 years, makes the most sense for somebody in the army to retire. But for him, in terms of his career, it made more sense for our family for him to separate at 16 years. So he had separated from the army 9 months before he ended his life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to suppose anything, but is there any relationship that you heard from him or that you feel or saw in that retirement or in that even role that he had before?
Yeah. I think that there was probably a lot of like just unsettling for him, and there was probably a lot more going on in his mind about leaving the army and leaving that life and world and then being in the civilian world. Um, the week before he passed away, I heard a lot of complaints and stresses and tensions around job he was in. He joined a private orthopedic group in the Seattle area. And I just assumed it had more to do with like the new job, like the growing pains of moving and joining a new um, group of people and learning these new relationships. And I learned later that it's actually like a huge problem right now, the suicide in military members that first year after separation. So that transition from army world, military world to civilian
Yeah.
has been really difficult for so many. And I wish I had known that at that time. I'm looking back, I'm amazed that, yeah, he had an exit interview and had to go through some trainings and seminars when he got out, but there was nothing for families.
Right.
And if I had to advocate one thing, or if the army ever reached out to me to ask me how I'm doing, I would say, maybe you want to bring in the spouses and the partners and the families when our service members are leaving the military,
Yeah.
especially when we see the numbers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you a lot about some of the things you've just said, but I want to give you permission or the space to share what happened to Sean. Like
Yeah.
your own words, yeah.
Yeah. He died on September 30th, 2022. And the week before he died was so mixed. It was my daughter's birthday. So what's today? The 11th of September. So my birthday is the 14th of September. And then I went away for a weekend retreat, a yoga retreat in Washington State. He kept the kids. They had a great weekend. I came back, and then a week later, the 24th, was my youngest daughter's birthday. So 5 days before he died, the 25th, we had a birthday party for her. We had just moved to that area from Georgia State. So the kids didn't have that many friends. They had just started school. So we had a few families from the school of the friends that she had made come over. Sean was in charge of getting the cupcakes and setting up the music and games. And it was a great day. I didn't think anything was unusual about the day. It was like any other birthday. And then that work week, he was at work. He was preparing to go on a fishing trip with his friend in Canada that weekend. And some things came up. He was down. At one point, he was questioning whether or not he made the right choice to leave the military and move out there. And I supported him like I always did for 15 years, 16 years. Um, but I also was just really tired of having the same conversations and giving him the same support and not seeing him do anything, right? Like he wasn't in therapy, he wasn't modifying his diet and movement and doing all the other things that the kids and I were doing to take care of ourselves. So the night before he died, we had a discussion about work and I tried to support him and he ended up going to bed and the next morning he I woke up and he was still sleeping and I thought, okay, he probably has a late start. And then he didn't come down and I thought, all right, he's probably resting. I'm going to take the kids to school. And normally I would go back up and change for the day, but I didn't feel well that morning. So instead, I walked the kids just to the corner in my pajamas and came back. And when I came back, I noticed his car was still there. And then I started wondering what's going on. Went upstairs, couldn't get into the bedroom, and had to and I called his name, I called his phone, nothing. And even then, I never would have thought that that's what I was going to walk into. I thought maybe he was upset because maybe he didn't think I was supporting him in the right way, or maybe I said something wrong. And so I ended up prying the door open on my own and took a few steps in and knew what had happened.
Wow. Wow, Reshma. Um,
It's a
it-
lot. I
it's
know
a lot.
it's
And I
yeah.
want to give people who are also listening like a moment to really feel that. Um, there's some like a few things you've said kind of tie into something I wanted to bring up, which was yesterday was, World Suicide Prevention Day, and you had put out a clip about the word prevention, and I think maybe this is a really good time to talk about it because of I mean, you're left with so many thoughts and feelings and should I have and why didn't all these things, right? And I think that language is so important around this, especially because we're not very good at talking about death in general, but suicide especially just keeps us quiet in all the
Mhm.
ways. So,
Mhm.
um, did you want to share a little bit about the word prevention and kind of why you see that as problematic, and maybe what words we could use instead?
Yeah, I noticed this last year when I had just come back to social media. So last year was the first year that I knew September was Suicide Prevention Month. And I remember seeing the campaigns and just seeing that constant use of the word prevention, and it triggered something in me. And then I started talking to other people and realized that it triggers the same in a lot of us survivors because that word tells you that you could have done something to stop it. And that puts in an extreme amount of guilt on survivors who already feel guilty, and it adds to the pain that we already feel. And it's not fair. And I think in the case of suicide loss, we're so focused on the person who died and what their mental health might have been like and what we could have done. And that's great. We should. I hold so much compassion for my husband now after doing a lot of work on myself. But we're forgetting that there are people left to be behind whose mental health is now even more fragile than ever before. Um, and so that's why I've started to speak up more about thinking about this differently. Instead of suicide prevention, can we maybe say suicide awareness? We do that with so many other months. Why can't this be an awareness month, not prevention? Because through awareness, we are helping prevention. We will prevent, but we don't want to put that on survivors. You have to think about everybody involved because when it comes down to it, m- eh, like we're dealing with mental health here for everybody involved.
Yeah. Um, are there other things that societally, even culturally, or friends like that people have said to you or that you've seen that you're just really are triggering or, not helpful, even in maybe some of the ways that people close to you responded after this happened?
Yeah. Yeah, just thinking about ways that we can better support somebody who's lost someone to suicide. You're right. Language matters. Like our words hold power, right? So, um, I don't think that when we approach supporting someone who's lost someone to suicide, that a lot needs to be said. It's like supporting someone who's lost anybody to any cause. We feel like we have to come in with a lot of words and remedies and we want to fix it, which is human. But just to hold space for people and to let them know with your body language and your eye contact, or if you're calling or texting, like make your language intentional and minimal so that they just know you're there because I think, and especially in the early months, that's all you really want to know. You want to know that your people are there And they're not speculating or judging, blaming. They're just there. And that's what's most important. I know that a lot of people want to know, like, did you see signs? And did he talk about this? Was he always dealing with depression? People want to know details. I think people want to know details because they're scared about somebody in their own life. So it makes sense, but at the same time, that's not really helpful for the person you're trying to support.
Mhm.
Um, when it comes to language in particular, uh, saying commit suicide has been a huge topic in this space. It brings on such a negative feeling that we're now moving away from that and using the phrase died by suicide. And I've told my kids too that if they feel uncomfortable using the word suicide, they could always say that he died by depression or died from depression or died from mental health or it was mental health, you know? Um, but the word commit, the only other death we use commit with is homicide. And that's a crime, it's a sin. And that's where this phrase commit suicide came from because
Right.
it was looked upon as a sin. And again, that just goes back to trying not to judge or blame, not asking about means, method. And then there was one other thing I was going to say, and maybe it'll come back to me later, but I think that's a good start. I think there are a lot of little changes we can make around how we talk about suicide and suicide loss.
Um, just with some other things where maybe we don't have the experience or the knowledge, do you think that it's best to kind of look to how other people use language around that experience? Like, for example, um, because I haven't had that experience, seeing how you use, like what language you use. Like, do you think that's a helpful way for people to kind of know how to approach it is lead by example of those who are speaking about it?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. I think this also highlights the need for conversation around suicide. Um, because, yeah, that makes total sense. You haven't been directly impacted by suicide, so you wouldn't know some of these things. And it's like I have a friend who went through cancer treatment, and I didn't know what that involved or the language or how do you support someone who has cancer. So I learned from that person. So yeah, it goes back to connecting and speaking and listening.
Mhm. Um, I mean, parenting is hard when everything goes as planned. Can you share a little bit about how this has, influenced the way that you parent, even if you're comfortable sharing about the experiences of your children, like the various ages that they've been at through this process, for anyone listening who has children and is just so overwhelmed with how to approach this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, the kids and I had a mindfulness practice in place before Sean passed away. So naming emotions and feeling them and sharing them, expressing them was already a part of our day to day. Of course, I I don't think you can ever be prepared to explain suicide to your children. And mine were a brand new 7, 8, and 10. And keep in mind, we had just moved to the Seattle area not even 3 months before he passed, maybe 3 months before he passed away. So um, when they died, we, we, that was me and a volunteer chaplain from the police department, plus my only family member in the entire state who drove up an hour to be with me that day, told them the truth. And it was very matter of fact. The chaplain told them, and his reason for telling them was really interesting to me. And I think looking back, I'm so glad he was there. He not only said we needed to tell them the truth, but he said he would be the one to tell them, not me. And he said, we tell them the truth because the phrase he used was, once you ring that bell, you can never unring it, something to that effect. So, like, you can tell them he died in his sleep, but at some point in the future, there's going to come a moment when you wish you had told them the truth and you can't go back. And I thought, okay, that's a lot. I'm going to tell my kids that their dad ended his life. And then the second thing he said, which was, I'll be the one to tell them. He said, you don't want them to always look at your face and remember the day that you gave them the worst news of their life. It should be that guy we saw that day who we never saw again.
Wow.
Yeah. He had 30 years of experience in with the police department. So something in my body told me to trust him, even though my mind and my heart were like, no way, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so they came home. We told them, and he told them, and I was just there. My cousin was there to hold them and to support them. And then later at night, the questions came. Why would he do this? He hated us. He didn't love us. And so I had to remind them that he had depression and anxiety. And then, as a mom, you want to immediately fix everything, but it's like you can't put a band-aid on this, right? You can't kiss it better. And so I immediately started thinking, like the wheels were turning in my head. How do I explain this to them right now? Because they're looking at me, waiting for an answer. And so I started talking about colors and the colors in our mind. And if you had to describe the colors in your mind or shapes, designs, whatever, what does it look like? So bright colors, green, purple, rainbow, stars. And I said, yeah, mine looks like that too. It's bright, cheery. There might be a little bit of black and gray, but it's like really nice in there. For your dad, it wasn't. It was dark. And I imagine it got so dark that he couldn't see light colors anymore. And he thought the only way to feel good again was to just stop altogether. That's how bad his pain might have been. And I think they got it, and I reminded them that this had nothing to do with us, that we loved him and he loved us. And we, you know, we did everything we could for him, and it doesn't have anything to do with us.
Wow. I'm really uh, curious and inspired that you took such a tragic loss in your family's life and you have had the courage to come forward and share the experience and help other people through grief. Can you take me through that? You did mention you kind of went offline for some time. So what has that journey been like for you where you're now, out here sharing this story, and helping others? And what's that meant to you?
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I never would have thought this is where I'd be. I He passed away, and at that time, I was starting my own business in kids yoga and mindfulness. I had been certified to teach, and we always thought that, okay, because I made a choice. I have a master's in public health, and I made a choice when our first was born that I would stay at home and help support Sean's career in the Army and in medicine. And so when he got out of the Army and I was certified to teach, the dream was we joked I was the side hustle to his main gig, and I was going to start my own business. But when he died, I went into panic mode and thought, there's no way I can take care of three kids on my own and do that by starting a business at this point in my life. So I kind of threw everything away. I had started an Instagram page. I shut it down. I got rid of the website. I mean, looking back, I probably needed to breathe more and just give myself a year, but I got rid of everything and I just did what I needed to do for a year, um, so that I could move my kids from Washington State to California, where I am now, near my family. And I turned off everything outside. And then around May of 2024, it was Mental Health Awareness Month. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I just felt like called to share because I was looking at my life. We had moved to California. My kids were thriving. I was healing. And we've had varying degrees of therapy in each of us individually. Um, so I just knew that we have gotten here because of the work we were doing before Sean passed away, because of the way we live our life mindfully. And so I thought I'm going to get on during Mental Health Awareness Week. It was mid-May, and I'm going to start sharing my story. And that first post was so scary because I thought, this, like, what are people going to say? I'm so alone. And I just had like this huge response from people from different backgrounds. And what was cool is each of those people, like, I resonated with in some way or another. Whether it was a female who lost her husband or an Indian person who lost an uncle to suicide, or even just somebody who had lost someone to another cause but was feeling the grief so heavily. There was connection almost immediately. And then that evolved. It turned into more sharing and more supporting. And then I got back to teaching kids mindfulness because I thought, well, I think people need it. Families need this. And then it turned into one-on-one support. And now for this month of suicide prevention, suicide awareness, I'm doing a weekly support group, a healing circle for survivors. And so it's been cool to just layer on, kind of follow my heart and my energy and see what people need.
Yeah, that's incredible. If there are survivors listening, um, what are some hesitations they might have being a survivor yourself, like reaching out for help, joining one of these groups? Are there some things that maybe you could say to them now that might be holding them back to help them kind of step out and join community?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because yeah, this is like this space where now we've had two sessions, and this space is exactly what I would have wanted, what I needed, and what I would have benefited from early on. And yeah, like you mentioned, I know for me early on, I just assumed I was the only one. I was either the only Indian woman who lost her husband to suicide. I was the only 40-some-year-old. I was the only mom of little kids. You find any reason to believe that there's nobody out there who's going to understand. So why even bother looking for support? Just do it on your own. So I would tell somebody who's earlier on in their journey to look for resources, to look for support, to ask for help, to accept help, and to really find connection with people who've been there, who get it, because it makes such a difference. I had a woman this morning say that she felt so alone and she's so happy to be a part of something where people can speak their truths and no one is passing judgment. Nobody's questioning it. And in fact, people are like, oh, yeah, I felt that too. Because suicide is complicated. It itself is very complicated. It's complex. And I always say the grief after suicide loss is just as complex. The emotions I feel as a survivor of suicide loss can be very different than what somebody feels after losing someone to something, a different cause. So it's nice to have a safe space to be able to say certain things and know that the others get it.
Yeah. Would you say, maybe someone listening and they've never gone to a group or reached out for help, and it's been, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years even. Would you say that it's still helpful, meaningful, important to find that solace and connection with others, no matter where they are on that journey?
I think so. I think, especially the way the world is right now, we all need connection. No matter where we are in life, no matter what we've gone through, we all need connection. So I think that if you've managed to heal on your own over 15 years, that is remarkable. But there's never going to be a time when you're going to regret connecting with someone like you, and there might be something, just a little bit that is added to your life and to your healing that comes from connecting with someone who's been through the same thing. But yeah, I believe that we all crave connection, whether we say it out loud or not.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the things that I hope to do with this podcast is also bring understanding and learning about different experiences, lived experiences. Do you want to share a little bit about being an Indian woman and how that has played a part in this experience of yours that might be different from other listeners or people who've experienced this?
Yeah, culturally speaking, mental health isn't something we talk about, something that we give a lot of importance to. Um, well, I should say it hasn't been traditionally, historically. We are definitely making shifts now, and I see more and more people from younger generations who are speaking up, sharing their own stories. And so, there is a change happening now, but I wasn't brought up in a home where we talked about mental health. And I honestly don't even remember when I first learned about depression and anxiety. If you saw a relative who probably had depression, it's like they're just something's not right with them. It's like nobody really talked about it. And so I think that's probably why initially I felt like I was alone, and I felt, if I'm to be really honest, I felt embarrassed and ashamed of this happening to my family. I've even said that if I were to write a book, I'd call it the holiday card, because I had every year we would do our holiday card like everybody does. You get your professional photos and you make them and you write a little thing. And every year I would send them out and think, people have no idea what my house really looks like. People don't know. And so then when Sean died by suicide, like, you can't hide it anymore. You can't hide that there was mental health challenges and he was going through something. And so I think that I felt those ways because of the way I've been brought up and because we didn't talk about mental health openly.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously there was sadness. You've now mentioned maybe some embarrassment or shame. What other feelings came with this that surprised you or just have been difficult to navigate that were maybe unexpected?
Anger. And I think that that is probably common for a lot of survivors of suicide loss. I was extremely angry. I would say it was almost like 50-50 heartbreak and anger the first few weeks. Um, I was so angry that I almost didn't have a funeral for him. And I felt that he didn't deserve that honor. And it was my mom who encouraged me to hold one. So she went with me to the funeral home, helped me arrange everything. And we ended up having something very small and intimate because that felt right to me. But I was that angry that I wasn't going to honor him with a ceremony. And I think if my mom hadn't convinced me, that would be a huge regret right now. Because now I, the anger comes, but it's not around for very long. It doesn't come up a lot. I've done a lot of work on myself to be in a better place. And now I hold nothing but compassion for him and for everybody like him. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's probably not easy to share the first time you said that out loud. But
Yeah.
I'm confident that other people have felt that way as well. So thank you for,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, one of the things that you do is you share tools and ways that people can navigate loss and grief. Do you want to share some of those with anyone listening today that's finding themselves in a hard spot to move at all? I know mindfulness
Yeah.
activity is something that you speak to, but yeah, here's kind of the chance to share those things that you'd like us to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So mindfulness can be anything. It can be looking out your window and focusing on the green leaves in the breeze, right? It can be a 10-minute meditation. It can be anything in between. But what mindfulness means is giving 100% of your attention to the present moment, just observing your thoughts and your feelings without question, judgment, right? Just kind of letting things flow through you. And when it comes to grief and healing, a huge part of that process involves checking in, labeling your emotions, learning how to manage the emotions. But you can't do any of that if you don't give yourself the time and space to do it, right? So my like the first thing I would tell somebody is find that time and space in your day when you can check in with yourself. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be 3 minutes of quiet time, or even while you're walking outside, do a walking meditation where you're just noticing things. Maybe you choose a color and you're noticing all the things of that color, or you're using your five senses to pick things out. But anything that like brings you back to self and gives you space to hear your heart speaking to you. So some practices that have been helpful for me include a gratitude practice. And some days the what it looks like, it can just be saying, I'm grateful to be alive before I even get out of bed. And that could be it. Other days, it could be journaling 3 things I'm grateful for, or talking to my kids about gratitude at dinner. Um, but one thing about gratitude that I like to point out is when we say, what are you grateful for? The common responses are my family, my health, my home, right? The I think the trick to having a solid practice is to be really specific and clear. And so what I do is I journal things that I'm grateful for that happened in the past 24 hours. And that can be like dinner went smoothly, everybody liked their food. That's it. It's still gratitude. And then moving my body, everything is energy, grief is energy, emotions are energy. And so when you're feeling stuck, going outside for even 10 minutes has been scientifically proven to decrease anxiety and calm the nervous system. I'll give one more. I think just well, I like to hold space for Sean, you know? And so it's like a mindful moment, but time for me to connect with him. because I think like we move so fast and life is so busy that sometimes I forget to do that. So for me, that's like at the end of the day after the kids go to bed, I just go upstairs and I have a spot where I just kind of sit and breathe and connect with him.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Has your relationship evolved with him since?
Oh, that's an interesting
Yeah.
question. Yeah, it has. It has improved. You know, it's crazy. I thought about that recently, like he's been gone for almost 3 years, and somehow I feel so connected to him. Like, because we're removing the darkness and holding on to the light. You know, it's like I'm holding on to all the good parts of him, and I feel like in that sense I'm even a better mom sometimes because I feel like I'm being guided by him, you
Wow.
know? Um Okay, that's not so eloquent. It sounded better in my head, but hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, it's such a good question. I feel like our connection is stronger. Um, because I believe he's somewhere doing his own healing, and he never did that here on Earth.
Mm. Wow. Even just thinking about, life is busy. You have three kids, you have all these things going on. How much time did you have before to just, at the end of the day, be together without the weight of everything else, right? So you're kind of getting that chance now to be
I
together.
know.
Yeah, wow. Um, for anyone listening, is there hope is such, first of all, I'll ask you like, how do you feel about the word hope when it kind of comes up in something like this? Whether it's other people saying you have to have hope, whether it's your own experience with the word hope, how does hope kind of show up for you and your experience?
Yeah, I don't really know. I feel like hope in this space has more of an uplifting, um, calming energy. But I know, like, in other spaces of my life, I feel like when you say hope, you're saying it might not happen, but we're just gonna hope it happens. You know what I mean? Like, um, especially if you look at different manifestation practices, we don't use the word hope because then a small part of you is telling yourself you don't know. Like the point of manifestation is to truly believe and to embody these things, right? So sometimes I get like torn between the two because I know in one part of my life, I won't say, I hope you have a good day. I'm trying to say, have a good day, or I hope this happens. This is going to happen. But I know in the grief space, I do. I say, hold on to hope. Um, there is hope. So, yeah, that's kind of where I sit right now with that. Just kind of in the middle, not really sure.
Yeah. So let me think about my phrasing then. What what experience would you like people to have? Or are there phrases, even just thinking back into those first days, um, something that you'd like to extend to people listening right now?
Keep going. Yeah. Like whatever you feel about hope and the future and what has happened, keep going because we don't know what is going to happen tomorrow or next week or a year from now. And inevitably, you go a year out and you look back and think, wow, there's always something that you look back at in the past year and think, wow, I did it. I got through that. This happened, that happened. And we owe it to ourselves to find out, right? So we just have to keep going as much as it hurts. And I'll never lie to someone and say it's going to be beautiful, it's going to be easy, because it's not. It is one of the most difficult things I've had to learn to live with. Um, but I keep going.
Reshma, thank you so much for joining me today and being so open to sharing your experience, what you've learned since then, and offering tools and strategies for other people going through it. I'll make sure to add all your links in the show notes so that people can hopefully show up to some of your gatherings and share it with others who might be experiencing this.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Jenna.
Thank you so much for listening to today's conversation with Reshma. My hope is that something today spoke to you, encourages you to reach out to someone, do some journaling, some reflection, some research, and most of all, that it's helping you become more competent, confident, and capable of talking about death in your own life. I want these episodes to inspire us, to impact us in ways where we get more out of the life that we have left and with those that we share it with. If you have a topic or guest that you'd like me to have on the show, please reach out and let me know.